We are a week into 2025, and I have made it official. Baylor's loss to LSU in the Texas Bowl is a good thing. We'll tell you why when we get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube, and it is Wicker Wednesday. So from Six Sports, Sydney Wicker joining us, a peek behind the curtain here before she has some electric Baylor Cincinnati basketball coverage tonight. We will have that recap for you coming on later in the show, but we're talking a lot of football. We're hearing from Dave Aranda. We're talking Dave Aranda. Sydney Wicker was at the Texas Bowl last week, and Sydney, I still have not had this question answered for me, but I have heard a rumor that it was a Baylor building. Now, I know both sides had plenty of fans there. Would you have called it a Baylor building?
I don't know if I could call it a true Baylor building, but I would say it was more Baylor than LSU fans for sure.
Okay.
And as much as LSU was saying that this was Baton Rouge 2.0, I would not say that Houston felt like Baton Rouge 2.0 at all.
Well, that's what I was really looking for, was that there's more Baylor fans. Yeah. That's the small consolation. It literally means nothing, but hey.
If you know anything about me, it's that I'm going to keep it real with you and simplify everything that gets hyped up. It was definitely more Baylor fans, and it was not Baton Rouge.
Yes, keep it real. So we had our own reactions to the Texas Bowl loss. I was distraught.
Typical
Cam.
Time.
Of
Doesn't
course.
Surprise me.
Cam meltdown on the air. Boy, you guys should have saw the Patriots post game on Sunday. Talk about a meltdown. But it's classic. That's what the people come to expect now. But Sydney, you were actually there. And so I want to know, what was the atmosphere like from the Baylor side of things after the game? Was it like morgue-esque or what?
I felt so well. First, I had my own personal feelings about it, and I was bummed for Baylor because I was I saw you tweet something, and it was just like I felt like we were past this point, and I think so many people felt that way. And so at first, that's what sat with me. But then as I was watching the team exit the field, specifically Sawyer, I saw him take a moment as he's going under the tunnel, and he's acknowledging every single fan. He's waving at them, and he takes a minute before he fully exits the tunnel. And you could tell something was going through his brain. We didn't get a chance to talk to him after the game because I would have loved to ask him about that. But you could tell that this instantly became motivation. And leading into the Texas Bowl, everybody talked about how this game was won to make a statement going into 2025. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not necessarily the statement that they wanted to make, but I think it was the statement that they needed. A little bit of a reality check and a gut punch to fuel them more. How many times do you feel more fueled after a loss? Think about how they responded after Iowa State. It was so positive after that. And although they're losing a ton of key leaders, it was a moment for a lot of those leaders to reflect on and to teach from here. I got to ask Josh Cameron, because that was a guy that Coach Aranda talked about being such a staple leader all season. He was the guy who, after that Iowa State game, threw his helmet down in frustration at a practice when none of the other guys had seen him react like that. And they go, whoa, Josh is upset. And they were able to respond off of that one single emotion from Josh. Josh, after the game, I asked him about his leadership this season and what he was taking away from this loss. And he was very simple. He was like, we are going to remember this. And this is going to stick with us. And I loved it so much. The fact that he has 200 days to sit on this before they compete again, that tells me something. And I think that is such a positive heading into the new year.
We are all about the silver linings playbook here, okay?
Positivity.
Yes, and how this turns into a positive thing. And it's funny you say that, because it was kind of the first thing out of the lips of the people up at the podium, Coach Aranda and some of the players. And it's not obviously it was a disappointment. We're talking the moments after this loss. There's some some douchey podcaster that's freaking out moments after the loss on a live YouTube. And here are
We're
the
not
players.
pointing fingers. We're not pointing fingers.
That's a composite character. That's a hypothetical. Not naming names. But these are the players who are actually in the game and the coaches that are coaching in the game. And right after it, this is the first thing they talk about. So let's hear from head coach Dave Aranda and Kyler Jordan right after the game. This is what they had to say about the loss and how to move forward.
I think, the opportunity with this group coming back is to focus their efforts and kind of harden their skin. And so whether it's praise, criticism, any of that don't get in. And so that we can be more efficient in what we do. So we get to these moments again, we burst through that ceiling.
I think it should give us a little chip, knowing that we had the opportunity and we didn't take it, So I think just going into the offseason, it's going to give us something to build on for sure.
Now, going back to the point you just had before that, Sydney, was it's 200 some odd days to sit on this. After an Iowa State game and you've lost 3 in a row, it actually feels like it's easier to kind of turn that around in a week because that's just like your focus. All right, tomorrow we can get better. And a week from now, we can see that tangible results. Right now, they've got nothing. They don't do football for a while. They work out and they will do some team stuff in a month here, but they've got a long time until they can actually see that they've gotten better. What kind of challenge do you think that is for like any team, let alone this Baylor team of like, we've got to keep our head right for so long. There's so much that happens during a football season where your head can go 100 different ways. Now they got to keep their head right for the better part of a year here.
I think it's easy for them. Look at how many veterans they have. I mean, Sawyer's an experienced guy. Josh is an experienced guy. Those guys make impacts, and we saw that. And I don't think that's really difficult for them to remember this. They're not going to sit and analyze every little thing that went wrong in that LSU game. I'm sure they're going to look back at it. They're going to think about it. But what they're going to remember is the fact that they really lost that game because they did it to themselves. So many self-inflicted wounds. And that there was, Coach Aranda even said, that game was the perfect example of our season.
Yeah. And it did feel like you referenced the tweet from earlier, like it felt like a game in September. Like that's how it's been. And that's what it was like in 2023 as well. And it kind of goes to like this old, like total coach speak, which I know you've heard 1,000 times of like going from bad to decent or good is not nearly the jump that you need to make from being good to very good or good to great. And that's what we're looking at here. 6 wins in a row. It's fantastic. And while, I don't pump up the SEC tires the way you do, but that is a step up in competition to play a team like LSU. And they knew that. They were transparent about that. And like, this is what it takes. Maybe you do win a game against TCU or West Virginia, making some mistakes, but you don't in a game like this against a coach like Brian Kelly and a quarterback like Garrett Nussmeier. It feels like that's the biggest takeaway for me is like, they're still good. This doesn't mean they're not good, but they have some work to do to be great.
They do have some work to be great. And this is the start of it. You needed the reality check. You needed the gut punch again. You carry this in, but you clean the slate too. And you give yourself a chance to rebuild in certain ways, to clean things up, and you come back with more experience, more leadership, and a tenacity to get the job done in the new year. So I like it.
Absolutely. Clean slate 2025. And there's certainly expectations for the Bears to be great in 2025. And they showed that with a couple of moves that they made yesterday, this week. Let's go over it with Sydney coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Let me ask you this. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't realize I was still paying for, a couple that I was paying for twice, and I didn't need to do that. Rocket Money is like having a personal assistant for your finances. It's a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions and monitors your spending and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place: subscriptions, spending habits, even the goals you want to hit for your New Year's resolutions in 2025. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving you, the member, up to $740 a year when using all of the premium features. For me, it was the subscription tracker. I have a tough time saying it, but I have a great time using it. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, stuff that I was paying for twice. Again, it saved me a ton of money, which is good for me. I like saving money. I don't know about you. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. One more time, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Sydney Wicker from 6 Sports joining for Wicker Wednesday, and it's been kind of an eventful week for Baylor. I haven't heard anyone coming in through the portal just yet, but I know that's coming. Dave Aranda said, hey, we're still doing visits. That's coming. But he does say goodbye to 2 longtime members of his staff, Caleb Collins, the outside linebackers coach, and Kevin Curtis, the cornerbacks coach, both part of the original staff from when Dave first came in early 2020. I do need to go back and check. I don't know how many members of that original staff are still here. Caleb Collins was actually an LSU guy with him from 2018 on. And honestly, the way you look at it, Sydney, that was like, those were the 2 soft spots in this team. Like, you improved the offense so much, but you still didn't have a pass rush, and you still didn't have much good coverage downfield. So in a way, it's like a slam dunk thing. You obviously don't want to see anybody lose their job, but that seems to be an obvious moving on from Baylor, an obvious move for them to make. But I'm interested to get your opinion on this, because you've been around a couple different college programs, and they made some big changes last year on the offensive side. The offense got immediately better. How much do you think of the downfall of this team, which is a harsh word, but how they didn't have it all together in September and the loss against LSU, how much of that does fall on their just not improving on the defensive side?
Huge. That's so big. Defense was probably the most frustrating side of the ball to watch. Yeah. Offense was so fun, and obviously good offenses are, they say, the reason that you buy the tickets in the stands. Yeah. But defenses are the reasons you win championships, and these changes are critical and necessary. I think it's so hard. I feel like Baylor's always been the nice guys, and they've been a little too kind in that. This is football. You have to be tough. You have to make tough decisions, and you have to do what's best for your program. So these were necessary changes that needed to come for Baylor.
Yeah, and it's just I think and I'm definitely a big part of this, seeing it with rose-colored glasses, because maybe it was the competition, or maybe it was just how good the offense looked. But I really thought they had turned a corner the last couple of weeks of the season, and it becomes pretty obvious looking back now that they're, again, coach cliche, but their best defense was their offense. Their offense just kept putting pressure on teams of, hey, you got to score a touchdown every time down. And now looking back on that Kansas game where you goaded them into a couple turnovers, big time turnovers, it definitely seems like that was the case of, hey, you had an offense that puts a ton of pressure on the other team. And as you see at the Power 4 level, that can win you games, but it's not going to win you the big games. It's not going to allow you to make some mistakes on the offensive side of the ball, which is what happens against LSU. And I do want to lean on, again, your experience with covering some other teams, because I think this Dave Aranda experience is unique, especially in this way of, I know you had Kiffin and Norvell and going to their pressers and seeing how that program was run. This Dave Aranda tenure at Baylor is almost like, I've never really seen a coach get catered to as much as this, and in a very out-facing way. You know what I mean? Obviously, big-time coaches like the Sabans of the world, right? They could do whatever they wanted in a lot of ways. But here's Dave Aranda, who gets to hire and fire a couple different coordinators with really one standout season in his 5-year tenure. He does that. He doesn't do pretty much any media at all. He gets a whole new football budget, which a lot of coaches are getting in this NIL world. And it's all, I don't want to say he doesn't have to answer to it, but it's almost like it's a little easy on Dave Aranda in a lot of ways. And now you have this good season, right? Where the only two deficiencies were those two things we've mentioned: pass rush, the secondary. And now Dave Aranda gets to correct that again after really correcting the offensive side of the ball here in 2024. So I kind of read it this way and talked about it on yesterday's show. I'm interested to hear what you think about this. It almost feels like all right, Dave, after you replace these two guys, you're going to have everything in place within the last year and a half. Like, now it's time to do something big. Like, we're talking 10 wins, Big 12 championship.
Yeah.
That kind of expectation, especially with the good portal class they're having now. Is that the way you're reading this?
Absolutely. That should be the standard. I mean, think about it. If you want, I mean, I love that Matt Jones, before they even played in the Texas Bowl, he was like, mark my words, Baylor will be in the Big 12 championship next year. He did say they will be in the Big 12, which is also correct, but I do believe that's what he meant. The Big 12, it was followed up with championship, and he said yes. So
I thought that was so funny. I mean, it's a great quote, and he's like so confident in it, but I'm like, I can't use that. As a journalist,
yes, you were just like, God, can you please just finish full sentences? Back to elementary school,
you can
full sentences. Yes. In media, we'd have to slice and dice.
Which you have to do with Dave, I'm sure, a lot anyway.
I think going back to what you said, though, this isn't just a Dave Aranda standard. This is a reflection of the Big 12. How harsh do you want to be? How much do you want to compete with the SEC? How much do you want to compete with the Big 10 or these other conferences, the ACC? You got to make big statements. And if you want to be as competitive as you say you are, and you want to prove that, you have to be the best, and you have to put as many guys in position to be that. So I think it's necessary. I think all these changes are key and huge and much needed. It sucks. Nobody want it. I hope people realize too, nobody is rooting for these things to happen, but you do have a job to do at the end of the day. And when you don't do it, it's time to move on, time to go somewhere else. We see this happen all the time, all different levels. It's just part of the game. So
it's what it is. I mean, it's a business, man. It was a business before they were paying players. Like, it is a business. And to go back to the Big 12 side of this, it's like, some people will see this as the sign of the Big 12 being a weak conference. I see it as being a competitive conference and a fun conference to be a fan of. And that is that there's no reason that Baylor can't go from 3-9 to the Big 12 championship in 2 years. And there's no reason why they can't sustain success if they handle things well in the NIL space and the transfer portal, which kind of evens out a lot of playing fields. I mean, look, Arizona State was 3-9 last year, okay? And they were picked to finish last in this conference preseason, and they go to the playoff and they win the Big 12. So I think it goes back to that. Like, this, if you're in the SEC West, that's a much different thing. That's a couple of years of getting some chemistry, getting people together, keeping people on campus, and then maybe you can compete with Alabama and LSU and these kinds of programs. But in the Big 12, it's like, all right, Dave, you've got your guys now. Let's compete this year.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. Again, people think that is a weak conference. I think that's a good thing, and it's going to make for a lot of parity. And it has the last couple of years, because again, this Baylor team is going to have expectations. I'm not saying, hey, they're a shoe-in to win 11 games or anything, but with what they're bringing back versus, some of the drop-offs from this team, Arizona State's probably not going to have Scatterboo. They lose some big pieces on the defensive side of things. Colorado is taking out a ton of firepower. It's a team that finished ahead of you. Baylor's got to be right in that mix. And I think these firings are a sign of a greater statement of that, personally.
Absolutely. And I think it's a sign of them prioritizing where they want to be.
And defense, which is important.
Huge.
This was a sign of like, hey, you can't. Right, the offense wins games, defense wins championships. We saw it just play out right in front of our eyes, man. People won't think about that because it was the Texas Bowl and they were 8-4, but like that is what we just saw. And it's got to be some pressure on the head coach too. It's like, Dave, this is your defense.
Of course.
You're calling the plays. You are the
Yeah.
mastermind. You demoted your DC last year to not calling plays anymore. Like, it's a trust, right, that you're going to go and find the right guys. But this will be very intriguing to see what this Baylor defense does.
I know.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Offense is going to be there. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there should be more changes to the defense.
Okay. Anything you want to elaborate on there? Or?
No, because I have to be careful. But if it was me, I mean, just as a Michigan fan, I've talked about it before this season alone. Halfway through the season, I was calling for a new offensive coordinator. I don't want to put up with it. We had nothing consistent quarterback wise. I hated watching our offense. It was brutal. End of the season, they do that. They fire our offensive coordinator. I was like, thank God. So if you have to make a strict change for a good outcome, I'm here for it. And I think Baylor I think Dave Aranda needs to focus on being a head coach.
I think that's a good take, to be totally honest with you. Because, hey, we gave you the reins to defensive play call, and now you're, again, kind of passing the buck. You're firing positional coaches. And I do think that comes down to the DC, which in reality is Dave Aranda. I know Matt Powledge has the title. But in a simplistic way, I mean, just looking at the point you just made, in a simplistic way, this defense doesn't need to get a little bit better. They need to get a lot better. A lot better. Like,
do you want a decent defense or do you want a great defense? Because right now you're sitting at not even 500. So
it needs to get better. And so does Baylor basketball. We're going to recap how the Bears did against Cincinnati. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. When I say Baylor, you say Bears. Baylor, I heard it. Bears do bounce back on the hardwood. Baylor gets it done over Cincinnati, 68-48. Man, Cincinnati loves playing the game in the mud, and Baylor says, okay, let's play it in the mud, and we're going to play much better than you. And it was a positive performance all the way around. I know people will discount it because Cincinnati, it did not look like a great team out there, and I got to admit, I'm starting to see the Pete Souza side of things more than I was my own, because I was worried about this game immediately after Iowa State. I know Cincinnati had lost on Saturday and had lost back-to-back games, but I guess I made up more. I made them out to be more than they were in terms of their personnel. Jizzle James in particular. I like Skillings, but I also really liked Jizzle James and Day Thomas. And James and Thomas combined for 11 points on 4 of 17 shooting in this game. Our old pal Dylan Mitchell from UT just getting cardio out there. 31 minutes, no points, 1 foul, 4 turnovers. Just when he's not just getting cardio, he's handing the ball off to Baylor. But for the Bears, a nice bounce back for VJ Edgecombe in particular, who had a rough game. If we're being honest, a rough game against Iowa State on Saturday. He was not the only one, but he ties for the leading scorer in the game with 18. And I just thought more of a VJ kind of game. I thought the shot selection was much better. He was cutting and slashing, and he was getting involved defensively. Norchad Omier also had 18, another double-double. I thought, you want to talk about VJ getting back to his identity. Norchad definitely did. He did shoot a 3. He did make it. But he was a really effective player on the inside. He was 7 of 9 from the floor. He was absorbing contact and finishing through contact. I thought he did a great job. Both he and Josh O, who both had good games, did a heck of a job against Bandego on the other end. I mean, I thought Bandego was really a non-factor. Blocked a couple of shots in the first half, but was not the force that he's been made out to be. And Jaden Nunn, let me talk about Jaden Nunn for a second, because offensively it was not his best game. He again struggled from the 3-point arc, 2 of 6, just 3 of 9 from the floor. Doesn't get to double digits. He and Roach both held into single digits. They didn't have a great night offensively, but especially in that first half, Jaden Nunn was on it defensively, on it, guarding a lot of Jizzle and Day Thomas. Man, he was. I thought Baylor, the whole team was finally impressive defensively, and switching 1 through 5 effectively. But Jaden Nunn, I thought, was terrific guarding on the perimeter last night. That's what he needs to be. Most of the time he is, and we just don't notice it. It's just not something you see in the box score. You know, Davion Mitchell was obviously a very effective defender, like the best defender in the country. And it was always in the spotlight, right? Like Davion was always all over the ball handler. He was getting steals, taking charges, and he obviously did a lot of dirty work off the ball too. But I think it's not as in your face with Jaden Nunn. And there are some games where he's not like that for sure. Which Davion was off night. He never had an off night. But I thought Jaden Nunn was terrific, like all Big 12 defensive performance tonight, last night. But of course, I'm recording it on Tuesday night. And he needs to get that 3-point shot back to where it was the first couple of weeks of the season, because I think that's where he will still be most effective with this team. But I think you saw maybe not a fully fleshed out identity for this team yet, which is what we're still looking for. And it was the big question after Saturday. But the game they played against Cincinnati last night is much closer to their identity than the game they played Saturday against Iowa State. Like, it just is. And this is a game they got out offensive rebounded, by the way, and still didn't have a ton of assists. But I think they did some things specifically on the defensive end and on the offensive end with their shot selection that will travel well, that will take on the road and can help you win some games in the Big 12 that maybe people don't expect you to win. And so I think that is a positive sign out of all of this. That is a big time positive for Baylor. And these next 2 games I think are going to be interesting. Winnable at Arizona State, at Arizona. And then I think TCU after that, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got a chance to string a couple wins together here. And these next 2 will be a good test. You know, solid teams, good environments, probably even Arizona State, which doesn't care much about basketball, but it's a Saturday night. That'll probably be a good environment. And people want to see VJ Edgecombe. So it's a chance to stay out on the road for a couple of days, different time zone, new arenas, kind of like a non-conference game where you're trying to take it all in, but go out there and get some gritty Big 12 conference wins. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments below about this game last night and what to think of the silver linings of this Baylor football loss to LSU. I know we're still kind of harping on it a little bit, but I do think this can be seen as kind of a dress rehearsal for some of the big games to open next year. And I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on that. Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a ton. And we're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers. And you guys are the ones that are growing this. So if you like the video, do me a favor and like the video. And if you're watching and listening every day, if you listened to or watched all 3 of our videos yesterday, our episodes yesterday, tell us that you did that down in the comments below and subscribe to the channel because it helps us out. Also, you can ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video on YouTube. And then after that, it's wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you later on this afternoon on your favorite program. Thanks for making it your first listen today and every day. Locked on Baylor.